Hello and welcome to the next lesson of the IRL live streaming course. This one I think is a very important one. This wasn't initially in my course, but I had so many streamers reach out to me with challenges related to imposter syndrome. I'm not sure that everybody even knows what imposter syndrome is, so we're going to talk about that. Basically, you have gone through this course, you have the money, you've got a plan, you know exactly what to do, and then people stop believing in themselves. And I want to talk about some ways that you can get past that in this lesson. So in this lesson, we're going to put a label on imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about what it is, what it means, how you can identify it. And then we're going to talk about some methods for overcoming it. And I guess along those lines here, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I've never studied imposter syndrome. So I am really not qualified to talk about this. I'm not qualified to make any real advice, but what I can do is share some experiences that I've had or that other streamers have had and some tools that you can use to get past this feeling of imposter syndrome. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? This is just literally the first result that came back on Google when I searched for define imposter syndrome, so just keep that in mind, but this is going to be something that I think this is a fine definition and it'll help us to ground our conversation. Imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Basically, you don't believe that you're good because of you, and you believe that things have gone well because of luck. That is a sign of imposter syndrome. And this can manifest in lots of different ways, but it creates a fear of moving forward. A fear that you are just one mistake away from being uncovered as being not as good as other people think you are. And that can be hard. It can even be crippling. And I would be willing to bet that most people that have aspirations of streaming that never actually go forward with it feel this exact feeling right here. And I also know from the feedback that I've heard that from people who have done this course that it is a problem that people face. Yeah, another thing that I want to add here is it's not just new streamers that feel this feeling of imposter syndrome. Even streamers that are well established, that have hundreds of thousands or even millions of subscribers or followers or members of their audience, they can still feel this feeling of imposter syndrome. So it doesn't just go away when you achieve some level of success or when you check some box that you have in your mind right now, or that you may have in your mind in general. So being able to deal with imposter syndrome is important, from day one. So what I'm going to do first is try and reframe the imposter syndrome a little bit. And this isn't necessarily going to help everybody, but I do think that this is a valuable kind of thought process that we can go through logically so that we can understand how to kind of take something that might be considered a weakness and turn it into a strength. So imposter syndrome, the imposter syndrome cycle. So this is a concept that's in this article that I linked here. And it talks about how imposter syndrome can feed in itself. And I'm literally just going to read this quote here. The process begins when people overwork or overfunction to compensate for a fear of being discovered as a fraud. Although such efforts often lead to stellar grades or high performance, the person with imposter syndrome will temporarily feel better and are likely to quickly feel like a fraud again. They will feel compelled to overwork and start the cycle anew. So I think, in a way here, imposter syndrome is almost like a superpower. It can be a source of motivation for people. And this particular study talks about women in academia. I believe in the 1970s there's a study that they're referencing on this. I'm not sure how legitimate the study is or anything, but I feel like this story is really valuable to understand that imposter syndrome really comes from a quality that people have, that they don't feel invulnerable. You know what I mean? That they want to work to do well. And I think along those lines here, I want to talk a little bit about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And basically, and we're not going to go into this one as deeply, but the Dunning-Kruger effect is a name given to the feeling of being overconfident. It's basically, the idea is that the less experienced someone is in something, the more likely they are to feel confident that they like understand it. And someone who's an expert doesn't have the same level of confidence. This isn't true of everybody. This is a behavioral pattern that's common in our society, and it happens to affect the people who don't have imposter syndrome. So if you had to be on a spectrum of have Dunning-Kruger effect, where I'm just rushing into everything, taking risks and not realizing it, and maybe not even being successful and not realizing it, to the imposter syndrome side, where I am just working my butt off and doing the best that I can because I'm afraid people are going to discover I'm a fraud. Well, you know, there's a clear better end of that spectrum to be on, as silly as it might sound. And where you are on that spectrum is something that you have control over. So I think this is one way of kind of framing it. Like, you know, this is hard to deal with emotionally, but it also might be a superpower for yourself to harness. All right, I know that a lot of people have this. I know that a lot of people have this feeling of imposter syndrome, because a lot of people will ask me, like, how did you become a streamer? And at the end of the day, like, nobody asked me to become a streamer. Nobody like told me that I should do it. I just decided, hey, I'm gonna do it. And the thing that separates most people who say, hey, I'm gonna do it, from me is I actually spent the money on it. Like, I had the money saved up and I was able to do that. And that's very lucky. I'm lucky to be in that situation for sure, but nobody like chose me for this. And honestly, if nobody watched, I would still do it. So, you know, this question, how did you become a streamer, is kind of irrelevant. Like, you could become a streamer, then you could see how you become a streamer too. All right, I also wanted to talk a little bit about that fear of messing up, like that fear of being found out. You know, this idea that you might someday be discovered as not being as smart as you think you are, or as other people think you are, because you clearly, you know, don't have that confidence. You don't have this Dunning-Kruger effect, or you might, and maybe this is a valuable pattern to think about too. The consequences for messing up in your stream, especially when you're first starting out, are very, very small. You know, it's extremely unlikely you're going to like physically hurt someone with your stream, or that or hurt them in any way. It's very unlikely that you are going to hurt yourself on the stream, although, you know, if without managing risks, you certainly could. So I'm here to also teach you about those things. But, you know, if you're already risk averse because you're feeling this fear of messing up, then you almost don't have to worry about the consequences. At least at the beginning. If you already have an audience, this is an exception. If you do already have an audience, there are some risks with it. You know, like, I mean, you might everybody's going to embarrass themselves, but that's kind of the worst that's going to happen for anybody. And you have more viewers, you're going to be more embarrassed. I think that's probably a thing. And I think for that is like, while you're practicing and while you're getting better at your character and hosting your stream and being the version of you want to bring to other people on your stream, while you're practicing that, you're going to have more gaffes. You're going to make more mistakes. It's going to be more embarrassing. That is 100% true. If you already have an audience, one thing you might want to do is just try and stream to a smaller audience at first. Don't promote that your channel exists, for example. Maybe do like, maybe have like I have my OnlyFans of Bike Curious channel, twitch.tv/OnlyFans of Bike Curious. And that's like only my most dedicated fans are followers on that channel. And I'll do some of my behind the scenes streams where I'll kind of let my guard down a little bit and be a little bit more open, because I'm only gonna have like 5 or 6 viewers and it just doesn't really matter that much. So if you do have an audience, there are ways to kind of manage the risks when you start. So the point of this being that when you do mess up, the worst that's going to happen is you embarrass yourself, and it's very unlikely that any of these other really truly horrific scenarios will happen. Another thing that I want to mention is that you don't need to worry about being good at streaming. Like you're of course you're not going to be good when you first start. That's just the way it is, and that was how it was for me. It was way worse when I started than I am now, and of course I'm still trying to improve all the time. And that really segues me into my point here, which is like, you're not going to be good and you're not going to live up to your own expectations. You're probably the harshest critic. You have the most clear vision of in your mind of what you want your stream to be. It can be really overwhelming to feel all of these things aren't good enough when you're going back and watching your own content or getting feedback or whatever it is. It can be overwhelming to kind of know all the places where you can improve. So what I recommend doing is trying to improve one thing every stream. Don't do more than one thing, just try and do one thing. And maybe even just keep a list of all the things, but before each stream, try and make one thing better. And maybe you have a little extra time before a stream and you can do something that's a little bigger in scope that takes an hour or two rather than something that takes 5 minutes. But sometimes you're only gonna have 5 minutes before you run out the door for your stream, otherwise you're gonna be late. And in those cases, just pick something small, adjust the wind protector on your microphone, or try a new shirt on your stream, or like put a cable tie on something that you thought might pop out, or add a rubber band somewhere that like you've had problems with cabling. These are things that you can do that are super easy that might improve the stream and help you to manage that kind of overwhelming feeling of I'm not good enough. But also, that's a way of breaking down the work into small pieces so you don't get overwhelmed by it. But also, like, try and keep your ego out of the numbers. You don't have that much control over your numbers. The best numbers, we already showed this in the business of live streaming lesson a bit. My best numbers are when during COVID, when Twitch was putting up really good numbers. I didn't even have control over that. It just so happened that bicycling and being outside and watching Twitch were like all hugely popular for like 4 months during a bunch of lockdowns that happened in 2020. And I was out there streaming and tons of people were watching my stream. I was making more money. I was getting more followers than I have at any other point during my stream. I had no control over that at all. So if my ego is invested in this and I really don't have that much control over how well the stream is doing, like on a day-to-day basis, that could be really demoralizing. So I need to detach from that. I need to recognize that if I have a bad day, it's out of my control. But also when I do have a good day, I do take ownership of that. So that feels good. You don't need to do that part if you don't want to, but I recommend it. All right. And this is along the same lines. Just love yourself. Even if you had a bad stream, you made a mistake, you had a gaffe, you embarrassed yourself, you picked your nose, I don't even know what can happen on the stream, whatever. Like that's life. You're human. It happens. You love yourself no matter what. The last thing, of course, and I kind of mentioned this jokingly just a moment ago, like if you do find success on your stream, you earned that, you own it, it's yours. You didn't do it by yourself. You figured it out though, and you contributed tremendously by solving the problems that you had along the way and keeping a positive attitude, being the face of your stream, whatever it is that you're contributing. Maybe even you're on a team, but you are part of something that's amazing. And if it is successful, if it does achieve any kind of success that you hope it does, congratulations, you deserve that. All right, and that's all. That's everything that I wanted to say about imposter syndrome. Like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a doctor or anything. I'm not making any medical recommendations. I'm just trying to frame these feelings that I've seen streamers have before they get started. And we are about to get into the nitty-gritty details of the practice of streaming. So what better time to get amped up and ready to go than right before you need to start tackling all of the annoying fiddly bits. All right, that is all for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.